Welcome to the Masculine Spirit Podcast, Episode 2, where we discuss topics relating to masculine development, spirituality, and potential from a Christian perspective. I'm Robert Krause, and I'm joined by my co-host, Noah Bills. Today, we're going to be looking at the question, what is masculinity? And before we get into it, I just have a verse that can give us a frame of reference for today's discussion. So this verse comes from Proverbs chapter 24, verses 5 through 6. A wise man is full of strength, and a man of knowledge enhances his might. For by wise guidance you can wage your war, and in an abundance of counselors there is victory.
Amen. So, what is masculinity? Honestly, it feels like a pretty broad thing to discuss because I feel like in stark contrast, you have femininity, and like kind of with one, you have the contrast of the other. And people tend to put things on the black and white scale of either it's masculine or feminine. But Robbie, quick little, if you had to give a quick definition of masculinity, what is masculinity to you? I'm curious how you would define it.
It's a very tough term to define quickly, I would say, because there's so many aspects of it.
So you can't answer my question.
And it's no, I can answer it. I'm getting there. I promise.
Okay.
I promise.
Okay.
If I was going to give a quick single phrase definition, I would say that masculinity is the willingness and drive to confront suffering in the world willingly and to it is tough to define.
It's hard.
But I think it has something to do with confronting suffering head on, facing it, and not giving up in the face of suffering and trials, I would say.
For sure. I feel like when I think of masculinity, like the two main terms that kind of brought up for me are like strength and provision. Like it's typically, I mean, in like popular media and stuff, like strength is like an obvious trait of masculinity. Anytime you portray somebody as manly, it's usually like a big, strong, beefy boy or something like that, you know. Though provision, I think, is typically not highlighted a lot in media. Like I feel like you see that a lot in like stereotypical like roles where the man is the provider, but that also, and I think it also means provision more than just like material goods, but it also like providing in terms of like emotional well-being and like mental well-being and knowledge, skill sets, and on top of those material things as well. Like usually the man of the family is what like has a strong role in providing those things.
Yes. And I think the role as provider is becoming a little bit less defined with, women entering the workforce, becoming much more able to be independent and that kind of thing, which is great. I think that's a good cultural change, but it doesn't.
Yeah, obviously we like that. Like having the
Yeah.
ability to do that and not being like forced into like the homemaker thing, because you can be like a valid person and woman by doing more than just homemaking.
Yeah, and that's amazing for a man or a woman to embrace either of those roles. But I think the part of provision that is specific to men is that, in a situation where a man and a woman are married, say the woman decides that they don't want to work anymore and want to stay home with the kids, then I believe that it's the man's responsibility to work and to find a way to make ends meet no matter what,
For
for his
sure.
family. Whereas if it was the same situation but reversed and a man is just like, hey, I just don't want to work right now. I just want to like hang out, hang out with my boys and like you work and you provide. Like I don't think that's right. That's that is not an embodiment of what it means to be masculine. Let me just add a caveat to that. If the man and woman agree that the man is going to be the one who stays home and takes care of the kids and like that's what they both want, then that's great. That's fine.
But a man shouldn't be the one to make that decision to not work.
No. No. Not solely at least.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that's like ultimately ties into like it should be the decision of both ends of the spouse to like do that sort of thing. Because I mean, in the end, like not every man's going to be like 100% masculine, nor is every woman going to be like 100% feminine. It is like a there's traits of both. Like for me personally, like I grew up with three older sisters, so I was in a female dominated household. Like I have a lot of feminine traits that are derived from that. But I also understand that I have an edge in society to like bring home money, to like work hard, to be like a breadwinner. And I don't know, that's kind of like a role I fashioned for myself in the end. Like that's what I wanted to do. Like I wanted to make those types of provisions, but you can't just like abandon like a very necessary part of familial provision just so that you can stay at home with your kids all day and like do nothing else. Like if that's like your role that's been like put into place, like it's then your masculine obligation to fulfill whatever roles are set for you and your family. Like you have to be that provider, you have to make that contribution. And I think that really works on both sides for the woman and the man. But like we've said before, like there's a lot of strength inherent to men, and like whatever like needs to be done, like the harsher tasks, it's typically brought onto the man to do those things.
Sure, it's great for a woman to be able to provide as well, if that's what she wants to do. But the point about relating the provision to what it means to be a man is if it comes down to a situation where like no one's providing for the family or there is an emergency, uh, the man has to be the one to step up and be like, no, I'm gonna handle this. I'm gonna make sure that my family is okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like the step up mentality. I feel like it's definitely kind of like that feels like more like the masculine role. Like that's when there is a need, like somebody has to take charge and fulfill that need. And I mean, it's never going to be like 100% like one person like completing everything. Like there is like support and strength you gain from your spouse as well. But um, typically, teams don't work when both sides try to take charge and do things their own way.
No,
Like you need someone to lead through their own experience and their own strength, and it's definitely more masculine to be that leader.
and yeah, before we move on to the leadership role, which is a very important aspect, I did just want to mention another verse relating to provision. It's a pretty harsh verse, I would say, especially
Hmm.
if you're Christian and you understand what it means. But anyways, uh, I'll read the verse real quick. So, First Timothy chapter 5 verse 8. says, "But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever."
Ooh, worse than an unbeliever. L sucks.
Big L.
Yeah,
Big,
I mean that
big
goes
L.
back into like the providing thing that I was saying earlier. Is it's like somebody has to be the one to like make necessary changes, to take leaps, take chances, put themselves out in harm's way in order to get things done for other people in their lives. That's typically more of like the masculine form of provision. Because I mean, obviously, like the women, wives, mothers provide for the families as well, but it typically is more in the emotional capacity and in like the patience and understanding. Like they're the ones that like will bide their time with somebody in order to like fully feel out what's going on within somebody to like make them feel safe and secure and loved, while the masculine role is going out there and providing the tools and resources to like keep them physically healthy. And of course you should keep your children emotionally healthy and mentally healthy as well, but those are just kind of like the two contrasts of provision that a man and a woman provide typically.
Yeah, and the woman's obligation is more towards that emotional, mental support, like nurturing support. You know, both parents have that obligation to that nurturing and loving, emotional, tender side, but I would say the woman more so. And then on the man's side, it's more so the provision, protection, leadership,
Resources. Yeah,
but with, with the tenderness as well. But the point
for
is
sure.
that each gender has different obligations in the equation.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like you want to be like yeah, like we said before, you want to be capable of both, but realistically, when raising kids, you're only doing one or the other because you can't be out toiling in the field, so to speak, and being at home and teaching and loving your kids at the same time. Like one person has to fulfill either one of those roles, and you know, based off what we've seen as society develops, we have our masculine and feminine roles within each.
And that's the beautiful thing about having the masculine and the feminine roles. I think in today's culture, especially with politics, it can get spun in a way where men and women having different roles can be viewed as sexist, exclusive, and oppressive in some ways, which
I
it
mean, it
can
can
be. You
be,
know, if
yeah. Like if it's forced onto somebody, 100%, that's oppressive. Like we shouldn't have, like we shouldn't make people do these things, but we also want to, like somebody has to, regardless. Like we want to be able to foster the healthy side of those traits and those actions without forcing anybody to do it.
and I think a lot of the people on one side of the political spectrum, which I'm sure you can infer which side I'm talking about, they they don't see any of the value or any of the beauty in the differences between the sexes and how they work together.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
there's like an interesting push to kind of like abolish those roles. But I think that's more like we said before, it's more about like abolishing like the forced aspect of it. But obviously we need like masculinity and femininity. Like they fulfill different things for us and it helps us develop in many different healthy manners. It also gives us a sense of identity, which a sense of identity I feel like is kind of a big crisis right now. I feel like there's a lot of people who are struggling with the concept of who they are, who they want to be, who they're expected to be, and I'm not sure if trying to abolish masculinity and femininity is going to help that at all. Actually, it's definitely not going to help it at Like there's no structure. Without structure, it's really difficult to define things. So if we don't structure how we perceive ourselves as people and as humans, identity is just gonna become a worse issue.
Yeah, my experience with that is interesting because when I was young, probably in high school, I mean, I am still young, but I should say when I was a child, um,
old old man.
super old, getting gonna be in the nursing home at 24.
Yeah, as you should be.
Yeah, so when I was in high school and I would say even in middle school, I did not really identify much with masculine traits. I wasn't very confident in myself, and I think that that really contributed to me like not making an effort to embody what I thought it meant to be masculine. Or I would see like the popular kids, the strong guys who go to the gym, all that stuff, and like
Yeah, guys like me.
exactly guys like you, and
So I
I
used
would
to
just
bully you, and I was like top alpha giga chad,
yeah, I was just filled with resentment towards you specifically.
for sure, as everyone
um,
should be.
but no, I kind of because because at that age I felt somewhat estranged from people who did embody the more masculine characteristics. I kind of viewed them as not a good thing, and I was like under the under the assumption that it might be better for me to be weak or to just like lean more into the intellectual side of things, which is great as well. But you need a balance of both. Um, and I think as I matured and gained more confidence through high school and after high school, going into college, getting married, all this stuff, um, I was able to re-identify myself with the masculine traits that I was kind of running away from at one point. And I feel in my experience that the more that I have done that, the more that I have embodied things like strength, um, being a provider, being focused, having goals, loving those around me, having a strong community, um,
For sure,
all of those things, any masculine trait you can name. The more that I've embodied those things, the more I feel like myself, to be honest.
for
Um,
sure.
yeah, I
I
don't
get
I
that.
don't know
I
what
have
your
a
experience is with that, but I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, like I would say similar testimony. Like I mentioned before, like I was in a female-dominated household, so I felt like I was very naturally feminine, which I didn't really mind. I would say I feel like my dad pushed me to be like extra masculine at times, like more than like I wanted because I was like the only boy and I was the youngest. I think he just really wanted to have somebody embody that masculinity, but it was something I really struggled with for a long time. Like when I was younger, I was really short and I was really thin. So it was really easy for me to get like picked on and stuff physically. So it was really difficult for me to identify as like masculine because I did not like physically embody anything masculine, at least within my own perception. And it's difficult to say like exactly what changed. I think as I grew up and I developed, I wouldn't say I actively tried to like make myself more masculine. Like I kind of liked the idea of it. Not necessarily a huge drive because I had for so long accepted myself as somebody who wasn't very masculine. But I ultimately wanted to make more out of myself. Like I didn't want to be skinny anymore. I didn't want to be like someone I would perceive as like weak or not outgoing or not like a provider. I like my love for people kind of pushed me to like work on myself so that I feel like I could be like a better person for other people. It was really difficult. Like in the beginning, like I remember, like even with like some of the hobbies I do now, like with like weightlifting and like my like guitar stuff that I've been doing, I would just kind of like look at myself and be like, nah, this is something you could never do. You can never be somebody that like is like bigger or stronger or has these skills or has this developed mindset. You're just like gonna be meant to just be a guy who sits at a desk who's like kind of good with numbers and just like earns money and a living that way. Um, which looking back was like really harsh considering that like I would legit just like tell that to myself that it can never happen. But I eventually found motivation to make changes. It's not that I wanted to be masculine. It's just that like my inherent traits uh, pushed me towards masculinity. Like I've always wanted to be a provider, but I just had to um, kind of flesh out exactly what that meant and how I was going to do it, and also just like my general perception of myself. So I got my sorry little butt to the gym, and I made myself eat a lot. And now I'm like a slightly bigger guy. That's kind of nice. On top
Oh,
of that, I get
don't be so harsh on yourself. You're an absolute stud.
oh I know. Come on, come on. We all know that. But in the end, it was more of just about like pushing myself to like be uncomfortable and like do these extra things that made me just kind of more motivated and more like able to like do things that other people wouldn't want to do or like can't do and just like push through the pain and make more out of myself so that I know that I can be a solid foundation for the other people in my life. It really just kind of, I mean, everybody develops it differently. I think, like I said before, everybody has varying amounts of like masculinity or femininity. You just kind of have to figure out what you already identify with, what like you see in yourself, but maybe other people don't see in you, and like how are you gonna like change that, and how you want to like be able to see yourself in the future, what you want to be able to do for other people, and just kind of start working towards it.
It's not about trying to be the most masculine man, the most manly person. That's kind of where it gets into the cringy side of things. I'm sure that
Alpha male, sigma male, sigma male, sigma male, sigma
exactly.
male.
You
Yeah,
know, I'm sure like even with me just making this podcast and it's titled Masculine Spirit Podcast, I already know there's going to be uh
there's
tons
gonna be
of
naysayers.
there's going to be a lot of naysayers that are going to see that and they're going to be like, who is this guy? What he thinks he's freaking Liver King
He thinks he's
trying
top
to
dog, dude. There's a difference between like the I mean, toxic masculinity gets thrown out there a lot, but there's a difference in like trying to be like this loud and obnoxious like person who maybe has like a lot of embodiment of masculinity, but I feel like it's a really subtle thing that you notice in people. Like there's a lot of maturity involved in encompassing and being masculine. Like you don't necessarily wear it on your sleeve, but people can like pick it up from you just from interacting with you. It's kind of like a vibe, how you carry yourself. I think shows off your masculinity more than anything.
and I think because of the toxic aspects of, well, I don't even want to say masculinity because true masculinity is not toxic. It's it's a great thing that should be embraced and
For sure.
celebrated. But when people take those masculine things and turn them into something toxic, which happens a lot with the mistreatment of women, violence, all of these kinds of things. Uh,
Trying to like prove yourself way too much in areas that don't matter at all.
yeah, and it's ended up kind of painting masculinity as something bad in general, which is part of what I'm trying to speak
Rectify.
against with this podcast. Because true masculinity is great. The the toxicification of it is terrible, which is something that we see a lot, unfortunately.
For sure. It's getting competitive, and I think that's just like another thing with media. is that like everybody's doing all these crazy wild things to get attention, and part of that is making like making yourself into a showman rather than just a man.
I
Real
think
men eat
that
nails for breakfast with no milk and don't post it on the internet afterwards.
nails with motor oil for breakfast.
Not even then. Honestly, that's like lubrication. Like, what do you, little sissy boy needs lubrication for his nails? Nah, no, eat it
Oh,
raw,
you eat them dry and raw.
dry, dry and rusty. You got to feel the tetanus going down your throat.
That's beautiful. That's masculinity if I've ever
But
heard it.
but you don't talk about it. You don't tell anybody that you do it because that's masculine.
Oh yeah, it's all in the dark. The work that is unseen, that's what truly counts.
Honestly, I feel like that is like kind of a facet of masculinity, and maybe even like a little bit of the toxic one is like you do all these like things that are really harsh on you and really difficult to like provide, but you don't really talk about it. That's an issue you see a lot within masculinity is the whole like bottling things up. Which I mean, to an extent, like I would say that someone who's masculine doesn't really like complain. I was going to use another word. Doesn't complain a lot about like the issues that they have because they understand that like somebody has to undertake it and somebody has to do it. But on one hand, you also don't want to like completely cut yourself off from like being like honest with yourself, being like, yeah, no, this job sucks, but I have to do it. You can express that, but you're not really going to be somebody who constantly complains about it and like makes that problem other people's problems. You suck it up and you do it. It's hard, but you do it. My dad had to work 2 to 3 jobs for most of my upbringing just to get food on the table. I don't hear that man complain. That dude's masculine as heck.
I'll say your dad is a Chad.
Chad dad. You know, I aspire to be someone like that. Ideally, I would provide with one job and not have to do the 2, 3 job thing. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean that's part of what your dad was working for, right? To give you better opportunities than what he had, which is an amazing thing.
For sure.
And with the discussion of not complaining, but also not bottling things up, I think that kind of comes back to the definition of masculinity that I gave at the beginning, which
For sure.
is being able to look suffering in the face and face it head on. You have to be able to do that. Sometimes you'll face circumstances where you're not strong enough and you need help. You're always going to need some form of help. You can't do it on your own.
Very rarely do you not.
Yeah. Um, but you have to have a place to discuss the negative emotions that you have, because you're going to face things in life that will cause you pain,
It'll
things
suck.
that people might betray you, uh, friendships might go bad, relationships might go bad, might lose a job, all kinds of troubles that that can face us. I'm sure that everyone is familiar with the trials of life,
Yep. Life
but
isn't fair.
there has to be a balance of facing those things and kind of shutting up about them and just moving forward, but also being able to know when to speak about them and to when to talk openly and be vulnerable about your feelings, and who to do it with, because it's not it's not always appropriate with every single person to completely just like spill all the things that you're going through. You need to
Yeah, I don't want to hear the trauma dump. You gotta
exactly
you gotta
exactly
save that for the right person, right time, right relationship.
yeah. And I mean, I would say, being married it's good to
I bet
discuss a
that's
lot
nice.
of things with your wife, but there are
Yeah, for
certain
sure.
things that that men face and are mainly men's challenges. And it's amazing for you to be able to discuss those things with other men, whether it's your friends or your dad, whoever it is. And then the same thing goes for women. There are things that are primarily women's issues, women's struggles that are kind of better to be discussed just among women because they have experience with those things.
Yeah. And it's like, and it's not necessarily like a bad thing to have the other party be aware of those issues, but it's more like if you're really looking for solution and like true understanding, you have to go to somebody that actually like has the capacity to understand what you're going through and has been there before and has those like similar experiences. Um, it is masculine to ask for help, but at the same time, like we're all struggling. We all have things we have to get through. Know your own, make peace with your own, and get through it. You can't have someone hold your hand the entire time.
Yeah, you want to try not to be a burden to those around you, unless it's extreme circumstances. You know,
For
if
sure,
you're having
100%.
suicidal thoughts, uh, um, extreme depression, stuff like that. Like it's okay. Get all the help that you need.
Yeah, for sure.
Rely
It's
rely on everyone around you, but
you have
with
to know what you're capable of taking on. Yeah, that's a big
yeah,
part of it too. Like it's okay to just not be cut out for something, even if it like the job is good money and everything. But if you just like aren't capable of handling it, then just like step away, maybe take some time, or just like find something else. Like there's many methods to create the provisions that you give out to your friends and family. You don't have to stick yourself in one. Like if you find yourself constantly complaining about it or it's constantly just getting to you mentally and physically, emotionally, then that's a good sign that you should make changes. And that's where the leading aspect of masculinity comes in is you have to take charge for yourself and take responsibility for the things that you're capable of doing and seek something else out, seek out better options.
right. It's not about forcing yourself to do something that you don't want to do that's painful. It's about aggressively, consistently, diligently pursuing the things that you are most passionate about, um,
Exactly.
no matter what challenges you face.
100%.
Leadership, leadership is a huge thing. It's also a controversial aspect of masculinity, I would say, um, with the gender dynamics that we were talking about, because
You
you
don't want
know,
to like force things on people, but regardless, somebody has to still make the big decisions. And, you know, you receive and you get counsel from those around you, your spouse, your friends, whatever. But ultimately, if you're the one that's making the provisions, you're the one that's making the decisions, you're the one who's in charge, you have to be capable of like doing things, even if people might not fully agree with your methods. Like that's just choices you have to make for yourself in order to adequately provide for your family.
and one of the aspects of leadership that gets missed a lot of the time is the fact that the leadership role has to be assumed from a position of love first and foremost. The point of
100%.
the man being the leader is not to control every minute detail to be exactly the way that he wants it to be. It's so that the man can make the most loving and the best decisions for the family, for the business, whatever it is.
And I
And
mean, I would argue that a true leader in the end is just like a servant. Like, what is a leader if not the servant of the people, the person who's doing all these things to provide for the people that they're leading. Like you said, it's not about control. It's about putting yourself in a position to provide the most.
And the fact is that God has created men to fulfill that role as the servant leader in a lot of different groups, whether it's families or other groups of people. But people don't
Different
really like to
communities.
hear that sometimes.
I mean, it's not to say that women can't and should not lead. It's just like it's the masculine trait of it is leadership.
Yes, there are tons of female leaders that are amazing, and that's a beautiful thing. But in general, the masculine traits are better suited uh, to to leadership. But there are women who have a lot of masculine traits, and there are men who have a lot of feminine traits. So it's more about the traits than the gender of the person, I would say.
For sure. Like we said, masculinity and femininity is like a spectrum, if I dare say, for everybody. You embody different parts of it, and that's cool. You just have to make sure you're embodying the positive aspects.
And this kind of ties into a section that I wanted to go over, just discussing some challenges that are specific to modern men in the world right now. Challenges that people hundreds of years ago didn't face, but are becoming more prevalent now. The first one is one that we talked about in the first episode, which is porn addiction. This is something that is rampant. Everyone
It's
knows
quite a
it,
sticky
but
situation.
everyone knows it, but no one wants to talk about it.
It's a
Um,
hard thing to talk about, but yeah, it's bad news bears, man.
yeah, it's so accessible, so addictive, and damaging to
Yeah,
everyone involved.
it gives a lot of false ideas of like masculinity in its own, like things that how a man should perform in certain ways that are definitely not realistic or healthy.
And how a woman
So
should look as well.
for sure, yeah, or oh man, it's crazy how much it skews our perception of women and of femininity and beauty. It's completely perverted in so many different ways.
And I'd say from my own experience, when
Oh,
I was a consumer of such media,
I
I
like
I
the
was
way
a
you phrase
much
that.
trying to be as politically correct as possible. I don't know if that's the right word, but you know what I mean.
It's an accurate statement, so we'll take it. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, when I was actively doing that in high school or whatever, I was certainly a much less masculine, much less confident person.
For
It
sure.
definitely impacted my social interactions, especially with women,
Yep.
because when you when you consume porn that often, it's very difficult to get it out of your mind, and it starts just making you view people and especially women in different ways that just aren't good. And
It gives you a sexist perception of women, makes them appear like objects, which is totally askew.
people can tell when when you're impacted in that way. Not to say that they're going to look at the way you're acting and be like, "Oh, this guy watches porn," but
I mean,
there's
when you let something like that consume you, like you just can notice based off your interactions with people.
yeah, it's the body language, it's the way you talk, it's going to impact all of those things. It's going to impact how comfortable you are in different social situations. So it is unprecedented in history. There's never been a time previous to like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago when internet porn became huge, where men could access images of, probably millions at this point, millions of women, naked women, potential mates, if you want to put it that way.
For sure.
It's never been that way before.
Yeah, it's definitely a big issue. The consumer issues are crazy these days.
I think that a lot of the issues with consuming, whether it's porn or social media or anything that steals your time and your energy, one of the ways to overcome that is to become more of a producer than a consumer in
For
most of
sure.
the things that you do, which is easier said than done. But if you can find ways to create things rather than consuming things, it's going to pay off a lot.
100%.
The next challenge that I wanted to talk about is essentially the abandonment of traditional values within the overarching culture, especially in the US. I'm sure it can be similar in different countries as well. But in the US, there's just this huge move away from traditional values within the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years. And I think it's been damaging people's perception of masculinity and also men's personal identity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I can see why there has been like a movement away from certain traditional values because there's obviously like things in society that we should change and we should evolve and move away from. But it shouldn't be like a complete abandonment of them. There are still, I mean, because looking back in the past, there has been a lot of uh, masculinity that was overpowering and forced women to be submissive or fulfill very specific roles and do nothing else to the point where we would, you know, chastise them or even like physically harm them for doing anything outside of that. But like we've discussed before, that doesn't mean that like masculinity as a whole is a bad thing. Masculinity in the true sense is a good thing. It's something we hold on to. But we have to recognize what things about our cultures that should evolve and what have been there for a reason and why it has worked and why society has been able to evolve instead of devolve. Like obviously there's things that were done right if we're able to get to where we are today. If everything was done completely wrong, we'd be regressing, you know.
We cannot throw away everything that our society is built on. It'd be foolish to say that the US or a lot of other countries are completely wrong in their traditional thinking. There are, of course, there are negative aspects of things that have happened in the past.
For sure.
There's terrible things, terrible abuses of women, of minorities in this country that should be fought against with uh, with all our energy, all of our effort to prevent those things
Fervor.
from happening again. But there are some very traditional values that are being forgotten, being pushed away that actually serve us all as humanity, and they've served us for centuries, if not millennia, to bring society to the point where it is today.
We
So
have certain roles for a reason because those roles cultivate learning and growth and development mentally, physically, emotionally. A proven technique if applied correctly.
yeah, an example of this is the institution of the family. There are some people nowadays who would like to either redefine or completely abolish what it means to form a family. But the family is one of the most powerful things throughout history, one of the most powerful units, and having strong families contributes to a society that cannot be overtaken by dictators and people looking to oppress the weak. So it's a pretty big deal, you know.
100%.
I think another issue that we're facing nowadays is a lack of positive male role models as well. There there are positive male role models, but
We all have positive male role models for the most part, but it is difficult to sometimes find the right ones to follow in a broad sense, at least.
usually the unhealthy or toxic, if you will humor me, the toxic role models are the ones that are pushed in the media, the ones that are given the most attention. And so the good ones tend to fall by the wayside, and they're harder to find.
For sure. And I mean, I think it's most important to find like role models like within your own life rather through media. Like there is like some uh, good stuff to be obtained from media influencers. Like these are people that are generally popular for a reason, though I would argue that a lot of those reasons is just being controversial and, like you said, just getting them attention on media, which I don't personally endorse. But if you can find somebody in your life like a coworker, classmate, family member, if you don't already have like a good positive male role model, a family member, it's incredibly helpful. You can even find like a good masculine role model sometimes in women, of course. Like we said before, there's people envelop all sorts of masculine and feminine traits. So you can find those good things in people, but you just have to make sure that the source that it's coming from is a good, healthy one. They embody it well, and they ultimately have what you strive to be.
And if you're a Christian, I would recommend
The
finding
church,
a male, well, yeah, church first of all, but a male role model who is a Christian as well and who has a little more experience than you, and just meet with them and discuss the challenges that you're facing, discuss your goals, some of the
yep,
temptations you have. Uh, it will it will help you to avoid a lot of hardship and to just be able to be there for yourself and for the people in your life much better, much more.
you can even like kind of find those role models within your peers. Like I know growing up, I feel like I've really developed myself in a masculine fashion just by like having discussions with my friends who they themselves wouldn't really, maybe consider themselves hyper masculine. Like me and Robbie have a long history of just like going out for walks and just like discussing like really anything and everything and just like having that interpersonal discussions about what's going on in our own lives and our perceptions and potential solutions has helped develop kind of those traits because you share experiences, you gain insights about all these different life circumstances.
And even
And we're
though
the same
we're
age.
yeah, we're the same age, we're the same life experience level, essentially. But even those relationships, like you were saying, can be extremely beneficial.
Proverbs 27, verse 17. Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. I've always liked that. My dad, who's a pastor, used to say that a good amount, and that really stuck with me. It's the concept that just because two people or two things, maybe are seen to have equal potential or equal value, doesn't mean that they can't bring anything else to the table for each other. Iron has the capability of tempering and sharpening more iron, same as a man of maybe equal life experience, so to speak, has the capability of providing new experiences and insights for you. to learn and understand from.
I also view it as a warning against isolation, because if you're one man by yourself, there's not going to be another man around you to sharpen you, to help you improve, to challenge you. And so I think it's very important, especially for young men, to be in communities of men who not necessarily have the same goals, but maybe similar goals.
They should be people who have something that they can like provide to you. Like it's not about being surrounded by people who think the same or want the same things or have the same goals. Like that's cool and there is like value in that. But ultimately you learn the most when you have people who maybe think differently than you and have different goals, because those challenge you and those allow you to really like look at yourself and really think about what you originally thought you wanted, and maybe you make a better decision to change that or make good positive changes to yourself. Because how are you supposed to change yourself if you're just surrounded by the same things over and over? Same environments don't yield different results, and you want to be sure that you have, you know, people in your life to kind of make those contradictions to you, to challenge you. But the sense of community thing is big, because if you all you have is yourself, like that's stagnation.
And you want people who are going to be honest with you no matter what. If your friend sees a flaw in you, a serious flaw, and they're not willing to speak up about it because they're worried that you're going to judge them or cut them off, stop talking to them, that's not a great friend. Maybe not even a friend at all.
Maybe not.
Uh, a true friend should be willing to say difficult things at the right time, because if it's a harsh truth, but it is truly true, then that's how they show their love for you, is by telling you that, and hopefully guiding you in the right direction.
Exactly.
That's a great verse. I love that verse. I feel like you've definitely sharpened me throughout the years in different
Oh
ways.
yeah, I have. Heck yeah, I have.
uh, well, we do have another verse that relates to some things that we've talked about, mainly love. I think this verse is first and foremost centered around love. So this is 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 13 to 14. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. I think this is just some very straightforward advice. At least it appears to be straightforward on the face of
I
it.
think it's yep. But I think it's a very important thing. Like we to censor the idea that we do the things that we do out of love and passion. Ultimately, like if you're not doing something out of love or passion, like I feel like it's just kind of a dead end, like self fulfillment sort of thing.
And love, despite the somewhat feminine and maybe weak definition that it has been given in modern times by some people, love is truly the most powerful characteristic that any person can have. Uh, and I
I
don't,
agree.
I'm not trying to sound cheesy or anything like, oh, love is the most powerful thing ever. The power of
The
love.
power of love. The power of love. I mean, okay,
But,
there is a lot of power behind it, but yeah, like there's obviously a lot more to it than just having love.
well, to give some examples, like love is the thing that will tell you when you're in the middle of a difficult conversation with your wife. Love is the thing that will tell you, oh, maybe I shouldn't insult her at this time. And
Is that a thought you have running along?
I'm just saying, like, there are lots of temptations that we have to do things that are not loving, but the when you make the loving choice, especially in critical moments like that,
Hmm.
it will pay off so much in the future. Like, I'm sure if either me or my wife before we were married, if we had been more inflammatory in our arguments,
Hmm.
like our relationship might not have survived because if we're just insulting each other all the time, it's not going to work. One of us is gonna is
Oh,
gonna
for sure.
give out at some point. But because we've both made a conscious effort to temper the way that we speak to each other, even when emotions are heightened at times, it's paid off immensely.
For sure. I mean, when you truly love something, you have to like exercise like caution and control along with like, being passionate for that thing, but you have to be always trying to make the best decision for that object of your love. I was given this definition of love that I really like, that I always stand by, and it's love is choosing to do the highest good for the object of your love, which means that you're making a choice. Like it's not something that's like forced or like like a great expectation or anything. Like you're doing it out of difficulty, and you're making that choice to do the best thing that you can for that person or whatever it may be. It ain't an easy thing. Love ain't easy. That's another thing media messes up. It's not just like a perfect, everything's better and happy. You got to make the tough decisions when it comes to love.
And sometimes it will be easy. There's going to be really, really good seasons in your relationships, good seasons in your career, in all these different aspects of life.
For
And
sure.
sometimes you can get into that mindset where you're like, oh, like it's okay. Like I'm making the right decisions. I'm doing my thing. It's going smoothly. But love always gets tested, and the next test is always coming.
Hmm.
So be ready for it and practice making those decisions in tough times because that's when it truly counts. That's when there's an opportunity for you to either break or to grow.
I feel like that's like when you really actually demonstrate the love in the first place, is when you know, are have to like fight through it, so to speak. You truly love something, it ain't always easy. It ain't easy being cheesy.
A love that is not challenged and tested and proven true can't really be verified. Yeah, that's an aspect of masculinity, probably the central aspect of masculinity that I think gets lost in modern culture a lot of the time
Hmm.
because love, like I was saying before, love has for some reason gotten this feminine connotation to it when really it's something that every human should be fully embodying in whatever capacity they can.
For sure.
How about the masculine role as protector? That's something we haven't really touched on yet, but I think it is important.
Let's see. That's an interesting one because obviously, like when you think protector, like that's you think of like physical things. You think you're like there's a there's a wolf outside your house and it's about to eat your child. You gotta fight the wolf in your front yard. Well, you don't really have stuff like that going on. Like obviously these days, physical violence isn't a huge issue. We're not like consistently going to war or anything, or have to worry about some guys with swords the next village over coming over and taking our crops and everything. But
That's what they want you to
there,
think.
oh yeah, yeah, I guess that's true, right? Um, but there is like a sense of like spiritual protection or emotional protection or protecting your loved ones from, you know, the horrors of the world. I think that more goes about like, obviously we should be aware of like the bad things that go on around us, but you also have to give like an understanding that like there are things outside of our control that you should not worry about. I am here as a provider to make sure these things don't come get you. I keep things nice and clean so we don't get sick. We get good food for that reason, you know, keeps our bodies healthy. I won't let homeless men into our house. They could stab you in the middle of the night, yada, yada, yada.
I think
Um,
provider and protector, those roles are definitely linked in some way. They're very similar in a lot of ways,
I agree.
but protector is specific in the sense of physical protection. I mean, it's just a fact that in general, men are much stronger than women, much more physically capable, especially when it comes to fighting, if that's necessary. Hopefully, you don't encounter that in in everyday life, but
100%.
I think it's important for a man to be ready for that.
For sure. You know, you can't be running away from like a circumstance where like you need to be there as a physical protector. Like and yeah, I mean, it makes sense like that. Men are physically bigger and stronger and faster than women. Not many people are going to really dispute that. You can try, but good luck with that. Um, in an altercation where you're with, you know, your wife or your kids, you are the most physically dominant. You are the one who's going to de-escalate the situation. Ideally, you know, you can hopefully de-escalate it non-physically, but if it comes to that, you're you're the big man. You're the big man who's got to throw down, maybe, or
And
carry a knife.
in that in that position as the servant leader as well, the position as the servant leader and as protector kind of tie into each other because it's not only the fact that you are more physically capable of defending, but it's also like putting yourself in danger, sacrificing your own safety for the safety of whoever you're protecting, whether it's your family or other people around you.
Your homies. If you're the biggest out of your homies, you're the only one that's allowed to fight.
If you're the big homie, you gotta step up.
The big homie.
Oh, yeah. And with that physical aspect, I think it's also important to mention physical fitness as an aspect of masculinity. Of course, there are men who, for whatever reason, can't really be physically fit, whether it's medical reasons or a disability, whatever it is. But the point is that with whatever body, whatever capabilities you are given, it's your responsibility to keep yourself strong, make sure you're try to keep your joints healthy, try to keep your
Yep.
muscles strong, just general general fitness. That's a
It's a
moral
good thing for
thing to
multiple
me.
reasons.
Yeah,
Speak softly and carry a big stick. Is that the quote?
it
Something
is.
like that.
I think that's
Um,
Teddy Roosevelt.
from Mr. Man himself.
Big stick man.
But yeah, definitely it's good to keep your body nice and in shape and ready for such things. I mean, just in general, having a healthy, strong body is good for the mind and in other aspects. So hit the gym,
Sure, not
hit the
even just
gym.
in regard to physical potential physical violence, which hopefully we can avoid, but also just with regard to being able to move things, like say your family needs to move or you need to help your friend move and you need to pick up some
Somebody's got
heavy
to carry the
stuff.
other end of the couch, man. It's a heavy couch.
Who's going to carry the boats?
Yeah. Somebody's got to carry those boats, man.
If you're not carrying the boats, what are you doing?
tell me you're not going to carry this boat?
I have an interesting question for you.
Ask away.
Yeah. Yeah. When do you feel the most masculine?
Honestly, honestly, I feel the most masculine when I'm like around women. I feel like when I'm around like the girls that like I've been dating, or like when I'm around like my sisters, like I feel like that stark contrast, like that's when my masculine roles like come out the most.
Absolute baller.
Because then in those points, like I am the one who is obviously like the protector. If anything, I'm the one that's the shoulder to cry on. I'm the one that's driving people around, even ordering for people, yada yada yada. Like I'm the one that just like will naturally like take charge in a lot of those situations when I'm just around women. So I feel like that's when I feel the most masculine. That in the gym. After you get a good pump at the gym, dude, you just feel baller. You get the muscles coming in. You're like, yeah, that's what a man looks like.
There's
Yeah,
nothing like a heavenly pump.
100%.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think being around women in a setting with a lot of women and not as many men can highlight masculine traits because there's that contrast there. So I get that. I
Oh
think
yeah, oh yeah.
for me, I feel the most masculine
You
when
take out the
I
trash.
am when my wife makes me do the laundry, actually. Uh,
Interesting. I was close.
no, but it's really any time that I am facing something challenging when I'm making a conscious decision to like
Is
face a
laundry
challenge.
that challenging for you?
All right, let's move past the laundry.
Okay, okay.
But yes,
Okay.
it
That's
is
just an
pretty challenging.
example of something. Okay.
No, I was
Continue.
just messing around about the laundry.
Okay,
But
okay.
yeah, when I make the conscious decision to do something difficult that is uncomfortable for me, but I know that it's worth it in the end and that it's a loving decision for me to do that thing.
For sure.
So sometimes it could just be as simple as like going to work. Like if I'm having a rough day and I'm like, man, I really want to call in today. I'm just not feeling it, but I decide to go to work anyway. Makes me feel pretty masculine. Really gets that testosterone pumping.
Yeah, you get that hunter gatherer like mentality, monkey brain activation. You're like, yes, must provide, gather
Exactly.
monies. I feel that. No, that definitely makes sense. I would say that's definitely something that makes me feel masculine. Like especially when I'm like, yeah, when I'm like really tired and I don't want to do something, I'm just like pulling up to my shift and I'm feeling terrible, and I'm like, well, somebody's got to do it. And then I walk in, I do great work, I get out, and I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah,
It's a
I feel
beautiful
that makes
feeling
sense.
to just go in there and get stuff done. There's
Amen, amen, brother.
there's a beauty to it. Sometimes, you're just feeling resistance to completing a certain task that you really need to do.
Yeah,
And
nobody wants to do work. I mean,
yeah,
if you have a job that you love, that's awesome. But 90% of us don't, and it's work and it sucks. But it's something you got to do. You do not. The man who does not work does not eat.
very true. And men are very different despite all of us being men. We have different qualities that define us, different
Yeah,
personalities, different
a couple of
preferences.
different ones. You know,
Yeah,
you're either into cars, um, collecting like a bunch of like guitar equipment, or you know a bunch of like World War II facts, and that's like the three main different male qualities. You got one of those,
or carpentry. That's
or
another
carpentry. Yep,
option. Maybe
tradesman.
smoking meats.
Yeah, meat smoking. I haven't seen one of those guys in a while. Those are the 5 male archetypes.
Yeah, that's the extent of male personalities. Actually, it doesn't go deeper than that.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
So with this vast array of different archetypes that we have, how can every man embody masculinity despite those differences?
As we've discussed before, there is a range of masculine behaviors, and we all kind of encompass our own. It's more of just about finding what you are naturally good at, honing those skills, desires, working towards a certain dream, and you gain something from it. You take what you gain and you share it with others, and that's how you provide. How you do that and all the steps in between, that's up to you. But that's like a basic premise to me.
Sure, it's like there are certain requisites that kind of must be met in every man's life. Well, I shouldn't say every man, but there's a certain baseline, a standard baseline that if you meet that, it's going to be great. It's going to improve your life a lot. And I would say those baseline standards would be things like physical fitness, having a job that has some kind of prospect of advancement, or at least working
Cool, bro.
towards that job if you're in school, having relationships, having strong relationships, whether it's with friends or a romantic relationship. And then
Imagine
I would
having one of
say,
those.
you said you have neither one of those?
I said imagine having one of those to the romantic aspect. But yeah, continue.
Hey, it happens all in good time. There's no need to rush.
Amen, brother.
And the last one that I was going to say is some kind of spirituality, some kind of connection to a transcendent meaning, I think is necessary. And just being able to be productive and beneficial for the people in your life. I think that's a very critical aspect of masculinity. And within those guidelines, masculinity can be expressed in a huge amount of ways.
I agree. There's a lot of freedom, a lot of wiggle room. In a sense, it's something you define for yourself, but in the end, it's all about having strength and passion for something, working towards something, creating something for yourself and for others.
Yeah, being a producer, a creative, not
And
necessarily
making
making
good
art or
beats.
something, but yeah, some kind of production. I think that is an inherently masculine trait. Noah, do you have anything else you'd like to discuss? Any other questions?
I have no burning desires to
Well, we have to
discuss.
fix that. We gotta find you something to pursue.
Something to burn.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this conversation very much, and I'm looking forward to the next one a lot. Thank you all for joining us. Please send us your thoughts, suggestions, and criticisms at masculinespiritpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to continuing this journey together. Have a blessed day.
Have a blessed day.